Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Discovery Debrief, a podcast that dives headfirst into the proverbial deep end of the latest trek into the final frontier, Star Trek Discovery. I'm co-host Chris Clow, and I'm joined as usual by members of our bold panel of Star Trek franchise explorers, including Rachael Clow.
Hey.
Zaki Hasan.
Howdy.
And Cicero Holmes.
I murdered a good man.
Always a highlight, every time, every single time. Well, how is everybody doing this week? We just came off of a pretty interesting episode, and we always like to ease into things before we talk about our subject episode. So what's been going on? How have you guys been engaging with Star Trek since we last recorded? Of course, besides taking in Discovery. Zaki?
I have not been engaging with Star Trek other than engaging in Discovery. So that's all. That's what this podcast represents. It's my scant connection to the franchise during my busiest time of the year.
Well, at least you have enough of a backlog in your brain that you could probably call on it when you need it, right?
This is true.
But at least there's that. Do you find yourself missing it during the week? Like, what's the general feeling like when you do sit down to watch it with your kids? Is it kind of like a communal type of enjoyment of something they've never seen before? Or is it just more casual?
Especially now that we're winding down Next Generation, we've still got all good things waiting for us. But once that's done, it's, we're into Deep Space Nine completely. So that's fun for me because that's my favorite of the modern shows. And so I'm really looking forward to getting into the more arc-based stuff and see how they plug in with that.
How many episodes of Deep Space Nine are by themselves before you get to Voyager?
Well, I think it's like half a season, right? So
something to that
12,
effect.
12, 13, I think.
Mm-hmm, yeah, well, it's a pretty good stretch of time.
Because Voyager started early part of 95. So basically, DS9 had a fall of 94 all to itself, not including Generations.
Yeah, it'll be pretty interesting to see how they adapt to an entirely new show that's not necessarily fully connected to everything else that's going on. Because, that's one of the reasons I love Deep Space Nine is because even though it's on a station and it's not on a ship, it feels most connected to like Federation society, even though it's far from it. But hey, all things. Well, definitely let us know when you do get to All Good Things, because man, that'll be cool to hear how they take that one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Rachael, what's the week been like for you in addition to Discovery?
Well, I've been listening to the audiobook of the new Discovery tie-in novel.
Drastic Measures.
Yeah. I listened to it for like 3 hours in the middle of the night a couple nights ago when I couldn't sleep.
Considering the subject matter of the book, it seems like it would just keep you up more.
Well, I did start to fall asleep during it, so I had to back it up a little bit.
What else?
Watched some more season 1 Next Generation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Some pretty weird Ferengis.
Yeah, well, we watched the episode where Captain Picard and the Enterprise re-encounter the Stargazer.
Yeah.
How does that line up with what you've read so far in the autobiography of Jean-Luc Picard?
Oh, really well. Obviously the author was, took cues from that episode as when he was writing the part on the Stargazer.
Yeah.
It lines up really well. The Ferengi really throw me off because they're so weird and different in that first season.
Yeah, that's definitely true. They didn't quite settle into how we regularly know them and take them in. So it's kind of fun to revisit that. Cicero, I assume that you're continuing your watch of Star Trek Voyager. Have you absorbed nearly an entire season, or did it slow down a little bit since last time?
I'm finished. I'm done with Voyager. I've completely No, I am right at the halfway mark or just about at the halfway mark of season 3. I slowed down a little bit, but I'm still trying to trek through. I just finished the episode called "The Q and the Gray," and if you guys remember that episode, it's the second appearance of the the Enterprise's Q, and after one of the Qs die, who commit suicide, it creates a civil war between the Q continuum, and Q wants Janeway to have his baby to be some kind of like Anakin Skywalker-esque messiah for the Q continuum, and he transports her into antebellum, the Q continuum antebellum style, where they have a civil war complete with blue Civil War uniforms and gray Civil War uniforms, and there is a female Q that is his his love interest, and they had a falling out, but then they mate at the end. Spoiler alert for that episode.
Yeah, you get to see some X-rated Q action. It's very graphic.
Don't blink. Don't blink.
Now, I did want to ask you before. So, since you have gotten so far, did you see the first episode with Q?
Yes. That
actually dealt with Quinn, with the man that committed suicide. I actually really like that episode, even though the moral question is a little contrived. Right. I actually really enjoy that episode. Did you see the Riker cameo coming?
No, I did not see the Riker cameo coming. It was awesome. It was really cool. Did Frakes direct that episode?
I don't know if he directed. He has directed episodes of Voyager, but I don't think that was one that he did.
Because I definitely have seen LeVar Burton's name pop up a few times, and every now and then I'll catch who the director is as I'm watching the episode. But I wasn't sure Frakes directed that episode. It was definitely cool to see Commander Riker there, and I guess a few episodes after that was the flashback episode with Tuvok, where we got to see Captain Sulu, everything from Star Trek VI. So that entire, the entire scene where after Kronos is destroyed, or after Praxis is destroyed, and the shockwave and everything else that happens on the bridge of Captain Sulu's ship. So that was fun to watch. The one thing that I will say is that watching Voyager helps me to appreciate Discovery even more because of the serialized nature of Discovery versus the procedural nature of most of the Star Trek shows. And I think Voyager's really bad at it. I think because they wind up getting into these situations where you feel like there's no way that they could possibly get out of this, but they'll get out of it within, in less than 40 minutes. So, so it takes some of the drama away because that they're going to escape, and obviously they have to, but it draws something away from some of the episodes, not all of them.
Well, I'll be interested to see what things are like for you when you get into season 4, just because, and Zaki, tell me if you agree with this or not, but I think the show changes tone and even execution a little bit, especially by the time you get into season 4, because, they tease for the first 3 seasons the fact that, okay, you're in the Delta Quadrant. We know who's from the Delta Quadrant.
Right.
We haven't seen the Borg yet, but they're going to have to deal with the Borg. And obviously, there's some things that come, and I don't want to spoil it for you, Cicero, but there's a little bit of shenanigans involving their potential encounters with the Borg. But I think the show actually hits much more of a stride coming into season 4. But what do you think, Zaki?
Yeah, that's my recollection, and I do feel like, again, these are like 20-year-old memories, but I do feel like they did go a little overboard on the Borg by the end. But
absolutely.
But I mean, if we're looking at sort of an arbitrary, or maybe not so arbitrary, demarcation point, I think when 7F9 joined the cast, I think the show did improve. I mean, I had remained a critic of it throughout, but I would say, at least from my objective view, is that it did get better when 7 was in the cast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she's a very interesting character, so by the time we get there, it'll be interesting. Rachel, do you think that Voyager improves at season 4?
Yes, I remember liking it better after.
Did you like Seven as a character?
Not particularly, not any more than any of the other characters.
Mm-hmm.
But
what about?
I liked her better than Cass.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was just gonna ask.
Yeah,
that's the bar.
All right. All right. Well, we only have one news item to get to, but it's kind of a big one, and I definitely want to get everybody's perspective on it. So why don't we transition quickly into news? So this item is relatively big, potentially controversial, and may have some bearing on the course that the Star Trek film franchise takes. The entertainment industry has, of course, been reeling from widespread and rampant sexual misconduct allegations at virtually every level, most recently touching the Star Trek franchise when Discovery's Anthony Rapp made headlines for describing advances made on him when he was 14 by a 26-year-old Kevin Spacey. Recently, there have been rumors that Quentin Tarantino has been developing a new Star Trek film, and a couple of controversies related to that director have come up recently. In a piece by Maureen Dowd at the New York Times, previous Tarantino collaborator Uma Thurman detailed a stunt made during the production of Kill Bill that resulted in Thurman becoming seriously injured in a car accident. Earlier this week, Tarantino gave a lengthy interview to Deadline to offer his side of the story, which he said he did with Thurman's blessing. This was further complicated, though, by an interview that Tarantino from the Howard Stern show that recently resurfaced, where Tarantino was asked about his defense of director Roman Polanski in regards to his 1977 conviction of unlawful sex with a minor. Tarantino expressed in rather vehement terms that he didn't believe Polanski was guilty of rape, and there's been a massively ensuing industry, media, and public storm over those recently recovered comments. So, after all of that, my question for the panel is this. Because Tarantino has become a flashpoint of controversy recently, should Paramount, J.J. Abrams, and Bad Robot Productions reconsider having him involved in the Star Trek franchise, presuming that he is actively working on a new film? Rachel, why don't you start us off?
Abort mission! Abort mission! That's how I feel.
Yeah.
He's canceled.
time to, well, but you've generally been a fan of his work, and obviously you can separate the work from the man to a point.
Yeah, I think
what is it about this that
it's acceptable for some people, and I feel like it's acceptable for him because like he's never assaulted anyone that we know about, right? Like
conceivably, yeah.
It doesn't feel icky to me yet to like his movies. Mm-hmm. And so that's sort of where I draw the line with like separating someone from their work is like, does watching it make me feel gross inside? Like Woody Allen movies now make me feel ugh. Yeah. So and if you have a different point of ickiness than me, well, that's your opinion, right? I just feel like he's just so close to the Harvey Weinstein stuff. Yeah. Just, because it was really Pulp Fiction that kind of launched the Weinsteins to prominence. Mm-hmm. And it makes me uncomfortable how involved with all of that he was. Mm-hmm. With regards to the stuff that he said and that tape, I mean, I hope he doesn't believe that now. Mm-hmm. I don't want to crucify him for what he said in the past if he...
Well, he did put out a statement. I don't know if you saw it.
Yeah. No, I didn't.
Yeah, so he says, I want to publicly apologize to Samantha Geimer, I think is her name. She was the victim who Roman Polanski assaulted, for my cavalier remarks on the Howard Stern show, speculating about her and the crime that was committed against her. 15 years later, I realized how wrong I was. Ms. Geimer was raped by Roman Polanski. When Howard brought up Polanski, I incorrectly played devil's advocate in the debate for the sake of being provocative. I didn't take Ms. Geimer's feelings into consideration, and for that I am truly sorry. So, Ms. Geimer, I was ignorant and insensitive, and above all, incorrect. I am sorry, Samantha. Quentin Tarantino.
See, that's the right thing to do. Say you were wrong, because he was totally wrong. Yeah, so that I don't really hold against him that much. Obviously you don't want to hear someone that you like or whose work you like saying gross stuff like that, but if he doesn't believe that now and he's recanted it, okay. It's more the how close he is to all of the Weinstein stuff that makes me kind of feel uncomfortable with it.
So,
and it's not like we're like ruining his, like, by saying that, it's not like I want his career to be ruined or I want him to like never, I don't know, like he's doing fine, right? Like he's gonna be living off the residuals of his movies forever.
Sure.
So,
but I mean, in regards specifically to this potentially future Star Trek movie,
yeah,
should he still be involved with it or should he step aside?
I don't know. I just feel like I don't want him near it because I don't want Star Trek to get I don't want to have to think about whether or not it's okay for me to like a Star Trek movie.
Yeah, sure.
That's how I feel about it.
Understandable.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. I'm just curious,
Yeah. I don't want to. He makes me feel icky, he makes me feel icky. His movies are still okay. But he makes me feel like he as a person.
I see. Zaki, what's your take on all this?
Well, I think that if he will, how do I phrase this? If he's gonna not be involved in the Star Trek movie, I don't think this will be the reason he's not involved. There will be other, like he just decides not to do it or whatever. And not in any way defending what he said 15 years ago, but I feel like that statement that he put out, I think most people will be like, all right, I guess, like not it's okay, but as mea culpas go, that's probably acceptable until or unless it, obviously, as Rachel was saying, it comes out that he himself was involved with something. And obviously the Weinstein connection, I think it's this question mark, right? What did he know, and when did he know it? But all of that, I don't know. I don't think any of those things, barring anything else coming out, are going to be a reason for the movie not happening with him involved. That being said, I remain skeptical that the movie will happen with him involved.
Right.
So,
sure. Yeah.
I think I've done like a twister. I'm covering all the bases here.
Well, and the only reason that I really kind of dwell on the question, well, first of all, it's a Star Trek podcast, but second of all,
it's what we do.
The franchise, it is what we do, but the franchise itself hasn't really had any significantly overt connection to a controversy like this before, especially at this kind of moment that society seems to be having of reflection. Yes. And that's why I think it's particularly relevant. I mean, if this guy who is a flashpoint of a lot of different kinds of feelings is going to be the guy that takes one of our favorite franchises forward, is that something that the franchise should be able to weather? And I think you make a very good point.
Just picking up on what you're saying, I mean, and there is this Trek connection because of Anthony Rapp and of course Kevin Spacey. But I was talking with Craig Price of the Matinee Heroes podcast earlier today, and I was making the same observation that really it seems like Kevin Spacey is, out of all the people who've been impacted, I feel like he is the one whose career was like hit with a nuclear bomb.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to be clear, good riddance. But I mean, I don't feel like any other actor has suffered the just total annihilation to the same extent that Kevin Spacey has. I don't know what that means, but it is kind of an interesting thing,
Yeah, no, I think that's a well taken observation. Cicero, what are your thoughts?
Again, what Zaki said, he says lots of really good things. Really great guy, Zaki. That's Zaki Hasan. He's really.
I need you to talk to my wife.
It's a really great guy. Really great guy. And I'm going to be putting on the thickest of cynic hats that I possibly can when I say this, and it's that if we do wind up getting a Tarantino movie, if he does decide to stay on to create and produce a film in the Star Trek franchise, by the time that film is ready to be released, This, hopefully not the moment, everything, all the progress that's been made over the last year or so, is not lost, but this specific moment will be ancient history. People will hardly remember it. So I don't think it as far as things go, as far as damning things go, I think that this is probably a blip on the radar that stays in a news cycle, stays a little bit longer in a news cycle, depending on where your interests lie. Obviously, within the Star Trek realm, this is bigger news. So it's going to stay in the Star Trek news cycle for a little bit longer. But like things are want to do, this is going to fall out of the news cycle because it's not a non-story, clearly, but it's not we're not talking about something. Tarantino's not guilty of doing anything but being Tarantino. As Rachel said, Tarantino's made me feel icky for years. Because the amount of Black culture that he just co-opts kind of at his leisure, is makes me feel icky. But like Rachel, I enjoy his films. I think some of his films are remarkable. But I also think that he allows himself to, jump in and out of culture, whenever he sees fit, and really doesn't get called to the carpet for it. Or when he does, he points to, some key friends to kind of try and get him out of it. And it doesn't make me feel good about him. But in the scheme of things, again, this is one of those things where Tarantino said some dumb stuff on Howard Stern's show, which is the place where you say dumb things, right? And
right.
Yeah. And it'll just kind of go away. It'll be one of those things where you like, oh, remember when, we just had the Super Bowl this past week, and Justin Timberlake was the halftime performer, and the last time we saw Justin Timberlake in the Super Bowl, he was ripping Janet Jackson's shirt off and exposing her bare breasts.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah. But for me, I remember that vividly. And while I love Justin Timberlake, the performer, and I think he's a really funny guy, I was angry throughout that entire performance because of the fact that he was able to get away scot-free, essentially, from that whole situation. But Janet Jackson, her career, while probably on a downward trajectory anyway because of the longevity of her career, but was irreparably harmed as a result of that incident. And he was the one who actually did it. They planned it together, obviously, but he was the one that ripped it off. And it was one of those things where people have to be reminded, oh yeah, he did do that thing. And I think that this is, for Tarantino, there has to be a me when the Star Trek movie comes out to say, oh yeah, remember when he said blah, 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 and people go, oh yeah, he did say that. Oh,
Mm-hmm. That was a very robust answer. I was not expecting all of the angles that you explored there.
Sorry.
No need for that, of course. No, but I mean, the point is well taken, though. I mean, I'm not going to be one calling for the crucifixion of Quentin Tarantino. I mean, he's made me feel icky in the past, mostly because, well, I actually just recently saw From Dusk Till Dawn for the first time. And I didn't need to see Selma Hayek sticking her foot in his mouth, especially when Rachel told me that he has a foot fetish. I didn't even know that. So that makes it gives a whole dark impression of that. But I mean, he is by nature a controversial personality. I think, by nature of his work and the things that he says. And yes, Howard Stern's show is known to be a venue for general controversy since he is a quote unquote shock jock. That being said, he should be held accountable for what he said, but I think he did do the right thing by releasing a statement, the one that Zaki read, it's a pretty solid statement. I think I'm in a relatively similar boat as you guys, especially you, Zaki, when you say, well, is this movie even going to get made? And there's no guarantee of that at this point. I mean, we've been hearing a lot of back and forth, a lot of hot and cold from Paramount Pictures in regards to the future of the Star Trek film franchise. Even though they've had 3 solid outings since 2009, obviously varying levels of success.
I'm putting this movie in the same boat as the Star Trek The Beginning. Remember that movie that was developing?
Mm-hmm.
For now, until I see, I'll believe it when I'm walking out of the theater.
Oh, maybe Netflix will give him the money to make that. I'd be into it. But I think the point is well taken. All right, well, lots of opinions showcased, of course, and thank you to our panel for sharing them, but we do have an episode to talk about, so let us move along to our discussion of Star Trek Discovery, Episode 14, the penultimate episode of the season, The War Without, The War Within. So shortly after arriving back in the Prime universe, the Discovery is boarded by Admiral Cornwell and Sarek, who are immediately suspicious of the ship and its crew since they claim to have witnessed Discovery's destruction months ago. After it's determined everyone is who they say they are, Cornwell and Sarek explain that the Klingon houses remain divided and fight between themselves to see which can destroy more Federation assets. After learning of Discovery's foray into a parallel reality, Cornwell classifies the existence of the Terran Imperial universe. Burnham then informs Cornwell and Sarek that the Imperial counterpart of Filippo Georgiou is aboard Discovery, whom they meet. Since the only safe refuge for Starfleet beyond Earth is now Starbase 1, Cornwell orders Discovery to warp there as she assumes command of the ship. So, questions are immediately answered here relating to the ISS Discovery, and honestly, I'm a little disappointed that we don't get to see the real Captain Killy. However, overall, what do you guys think of where the crew is now positioned back home since we're getting down to the wire in resolving the war story? Zaki, why don't you start us off?
Well, I think that, one of the thoughts I have is, are they setting us up for some kind of reset button that allows them to wipe out some of this continuity? Because again, the continuity obsessed nerd in me is like, well, this show still has to kind of end up dovetailing with the original series, and if the extent of the Klingon War was such where they basically devastated and overran Federation territory, like I feel like that would have been something that of necessity we would have heard about if it was something like 10 years ago. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. This is what irks me a little bit, is that the nature of the conflict with the Klingons, as depicted in the original series, was a long-running Cold War. And so, for me, what Discovery is presenting to us is so far removed from that. I'm kind of like, well, I mean, how do you round it off? How do you get from point A to point B? And then, related to that, what you said about Cornwell classifying the mirror universe, that irks the hell out of me. It really does, because it goes to what I said earlier about taking away something that was specific to the original Enterprise, right? When the mirror universe was discovered by Captain Kirk and his crew, and what this says is, no, actually, they just didn't know about the thing that the Discovery crew discovered first. I don't like that's cheap. To me, that's lazy writing. I don't like that. And for all the stuff people complained about Star Trek Enterprise, like playing fast and loose with continuity, I mean, they were very good about dodging those things that were specific to Kirk and his crew.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, I was one of the people who was a little bit maybe not annoyed is the right word, but I was a little miffed at Enterprise for trying to create a very different vision, at least in the beginning, of what the history of Star Trek's universe looked like.
Sure.
But obviously that was corrected by the 4th season, and then things were probably going to be even more awesome in the 5th season, but hey, we didn't get that.
Well, and Chris, at the very least, Enterprise, you could say, well, it's 100 years before.
Yeah.
So there's room,
True.
there's runway to get from there to there. I mean, here, this is concurrent with the Cage.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
I'm like getting super bogged down on all the fanboy stuff that in truth it doesn't bother me to the same extent, but it makes me say, well, how far afield of what we saw in 66 can you get before you're talking about what is fundamentally a different universe?
Well, I'll revisit that point in just a little bit.
Okay.
But before we get to that, Cicero, what do you think about the way things are set up now that we are back in the Prime universe and we've seen the war map?
Lucy's has some splaining to do. So, we're here. There are things that are happening. Clearly, it's not where we left it when we took our jaunt into the mirror universe. And we know ultimately we know where we need to be in 10 years. So something has to happen. And my fear is that much like the episode before, that the next episode, the season finale, will tie enough of what's going on into a neat little bow that it'll be resolved, I think, too quickly, or unbelievably quickly. And kind of in retrospect, I enjoyed the hell out of the ride from last week's episode, but everything happened in that episode, and so it was just it was kind of wild. So yeah, I mean, the fact that we're here and the Klingons were able to do, they just use guerrilla warfare. And you know what? The thing that really kind of bugs me is the fact that, and I guess this was Mira Lorca doing what Mira Lorca does. They did the 133 jumps. They discovered all the stealth technology so that they were able to figure out Klingon cloaking, and then didn't send it to Starfleet right away before they decided, what Discovery's next protocol was going to be. So, so the Federation didn't have that information. Like, why wasn't that information already sent as opposed to transmitted, instead of waiting until you got to Starbase 33 or wherever it was that they were going to pass that stuff off. It was very, very weird for me that happened that way. But again, you got to move the story along. So
the only thing I would guess in regards to that is just Lorca didn't care to get that information to the Federation, and he had already decided, all right, I'm out of here. Right. I'm going home and I'm taking the throne. That's the only thing I can think of. Now, whether or not, there was enough time in between the discovery of the information, no pun intended, and the transposition with the ISS Discovery, who's to say? But yeah, I mean, I think that's worth pointing out. Absolutely. Rachel, where things are set up at the beginning of this episode, how is that striking you as we get ready to head into the season finale?
I don't like it.
Really?
No, it's like Zaki said, it's like such a deep hole that they're in, and how are they going to dig themselves out so that in 10 years nobody would even think to mention this at all, ever?
You mean the war?
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems like if something like this happened, it would be a big deal.
Yeah.
Why isn't it a big deal?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there has to be some sort of resolution in which it's not a huge Starfleet altering event. And I don't know how they're going to do that. And I feel like I'm not going to like it.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to think. Now we're going to get into pedantic continuity territory for
beryllium
this
13 using beryllium and the omega 13 device. Everything gets fixed.
Oh,
thank you.
Nice callback. I actually saw. Just as a side note, they have what's the villain's name in that?
I think it's like Saris.
Yeah, Saris. Yes, they had the full Saris costume at the Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle.
He looks really so good.
Cool.
It was it looked really cool.
That's why he holds up so beautifully, is because they made that costume
in real life.
Wow.
Yeah, it looks phenomenal. So if you ever get there, then definitely check it out.
The name Saris, by the way, that's a reference to Andrew Saris, who's a film critic who I think one of the filmmakers had gotten a bad review from.
I did not know that. Oh, that's good information. Okay, but pedantic continuity stuff. So the next thing that I was going to bring up was the fact that Admiral Cornwell classifies the existence of the mirror universe. Saru locks down the information about Mirror Giorgio with the threat of treason, I think, the transporter chief. And in regards to mention of the war, I was trying to think of mentions in the original series of any open conflicts in Federation history or in Earth history, and they did mention the Romulan War once, but I don't think there was any other mention of any other war, and I would assume that it's not something that the Federation exactly wants to focus on in their history. But beyond that, see, I was personally satisfied by Cornwell classifying the mirror universe because it makes sense. I mean, if anything, if you wanted to trace back where things might have been fudged up, as much as I don't necessarily like to say it, to me it's Enterprise. Only because Enterprise made use of the fact that the Tholian Web showed this Constitution-class ship that just disappeared. So they said, okay, we'll make it so that it's going into the mirror universe of the past, and that is what creates the knowledge of the Federation in the mirror universe. And
but Enterprise took care not to step on TOS by having a crossover.
Do you think that Discovery, though, especially because the information of the parallel universe is conceivably restricted to one ship and one flag officer and I guess an ambassador, that necessarily steps on the original series?
I mean, not in a narrative sense, no, because it's not like Kirk and crew have knowledge of it. But in universe, to me, it de-uniques, if that's a word, what the original Enterprise did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, it's like super. It really is pedantic, right? Because just
that's why we're talking about it.
it really is, and again, I'm not like pitching a fit over it. So I want to be clear that this is more like that's me, But I'm on record for like probably what feels like forever for you guys, being like, I don't like that we keep going back to the mirror universe because to me it's 50 minutes and done.
Well, here's pedantic times two. Did the Enterprise's mirror universe episodes really even happen? Because I mean, they were just 2 throwaway episodes.
Well, but we have material proof in the form of the logs from the Defiant in these Discovery episodes.
Right. But so basically they are only real because Discovery says they're real. And that could be,
so you're going into like a butterfly effect kind of thing.
Right? That could be completely coincidental, and not even actually how it happened. There may have never been an Emperor Soto.
Okay, now you're just
there was an Empress Sato.
Yes. Excuse me.
This is going into territory I was certainly not anticipating. But no, I mean, it's an interesting question. But I mean, from the larger perspective of the timeline, I guess the way that Discovery is exploiting the mirror universe is kind of interesting to me because of the fact that it's being presented as sort of an untold tale, right? I mean, would this story, if it was told in a book, would it be more palatable if it were not on television? Because the expanded universe in both Star Wars and Star Trek and a lot of other, shared universe media properties go into like, okay, here's a fold in the continuity, so we're going to insert new information into that. And I feel like the perspective that we have is affected by the medium that this story is being told in. Mm-hmm, Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So in one respect, that kind of feeds into this larger fan argument of Discovery as glorified fan fiction, but it's clearly not that. And I'm okay with it personally. Rachel, what do you think?
Well, Chris, I have no problem with the Mirror Universe stuff. If she says, "Oh, it's classified," okay, the Enterprise didn't know about it. I have a problem with this Klingon war.
Yeah.
All right, a huge problem with it because they're saying like 80,000 people are killed, or like thousands of people are just being killed off on these colonies. And then there's nobody on the Enterprise who's like, "Oh yeah, my whole family was killed at such and such." Like,
yeah.
I mean, you think about the book that I'm listening to, and the Tarsus 4, and 4,000 people were killed there, and like 4 characters from that show up in some sort of TV media, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Hoshi Sato was supposedly there, and and Kirk, and then like all of Kirk's friends from, if
and now
there's
Lorca
going to be some
and
sort of some sort of massive loss of life that has happened like across Starfleet, like that's going to be like a really big deal. That's not something people just forget about and don't talk about 10 years later. We still talk about 9/11.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'll need to rewatch, and I don't think that there's any mention of a previous war, but the Federation does clearly have a very, very clear idea of how they perceive the Klingon Empire by the time we get to Errand of Mercy. The first appearance of the Klingons, at least as far as we know, Kirk regards them as a military dictatorship and that they annex worlds with sheer and utter brutality. And those are ideas that maybe were gleaned in the war because there's a gap between Enterprise and Errand of Mercy that should inform the Federation's perspective on the Klingon Empire, right? Maybe this war is one of those things. Because Kirk feels very strongly about the Klingons there.
Yeah, but like, it just seems like if this had happened, you'd have like, Klingons killed my family. Right. Klingons killed.
Look at Kirk in Star Trek 6 compared to in the TV show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? I've never trusted Klingons. I mean, that's him after what happened to David.
Right. Yeah. But, that's another thing, too, because especially as, like, second generation removed from World War II. And my grandfather was in World War II, like a lot of our grandfathers were, right? And, I view Japan very differently than he did. And Kirk's perspective on the Klingon Empire, since there's obviously, like, if I was trying to compare the cosmology or the makeup of Japan today with the Empire of Japan from the 40s, there's obviously been a change in the way that state is structured. But not so with the Klingons, right?
But Chris, this is the problem, right? After World War II, we reached a place where after the war was over, there were settlements and everything, and we had peace with Japan. We didn't after World War II. It wasn't like we had 50 years of Cold War with Japan. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, how do you go from all-out war to Cold War? What is that transition? That doesn't make sense. Because if you're at all-out war, you're going to stay at all-out war, or you're going to have an armistice.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But in at least in Star Trek, though, that's basically what happened with the Romulans, because they went from the Romulans just retreated into their own borders after they were humiliated at the end of the Earth Romulan War, and
other than a few interactions, they kept to themselves. It wasn't like an active subversion campaign like we saw with the Klingons.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I will.
Right? Because Next Generation is when they're like, hey, we're back because it's been 60 years or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is true. I guess the only point that I'm trying to make is that because Kirk was not part of Starfleet, well, no, because he was part of Starfleet.
He was,
yeah. He was at least a lieutenant by this time. So it's conceivable that he did serve in this war. I'm a soldier, not a diplomat, as he's famous for saying. But I don't know. I mean, it all hinges on the season finale. I'm not going to say that this is entirely settled in the canon yet, because we do still have one episode to go. I see both points. I'm getting on the fence again. I don't know what it is, but I seem to sit on the fence every time. But I'm getting on the fence again, and are to be continued. We'll have to have a very pedantic continuity discussion after the season finale. But we did get one of our first descriptions of the Prime version of Captain Lorca, whom Cornwell described as measured and reasoned. So if you had to guess, do you think Prime Lorca is significantly different from the man that we met, or are there likely some similarities? Zaki, what do you think?
I would imagine that he's as different from from Mirror Lorca as every other Mirror version we've seen. I mean, I think Cornwell, her experience where she was intimate with him, I mean, she kind of chalked up his reactions to PTSD, which in her mind explained away what felt like a very shocking shift in behavior. But the fact that she was willing to be intimate with him shows that she did feel comfortable with the Lorca that she knew. Yeah,
very true. Cicero?
I kind of think he's just a nuanced version of the Lorca that we knew. I think that there could be people that would say that the Lorca that we knew was reasoned and measured. It's all about your perspective and your point of view. So
sure. Well, as we alluded to earlier, Star Trek Discovery Drastic Measures did just come out this past week when we're recording this. We're recording this on February 8th, and Drastic Measures dropped on the 6th. And Rachel and I have been listening to it. So, Rachel, what are your impressions of the way that Prime Lorca is characterized in Drastic Measures in comparison to the guy that we've gotten to know in the show?
Not that different.
Yeah?
No. I mean, he still has it seems like he has all the same impulses. Mm-hmm. He controls them better.
Yeah.
In the Prime universe, he wants to punch a dude, but he doesn't punch a dude. That kind of thing. So, he's not completely different.
Do you find that believable, or is it a little weird to swallow?
It's believable. I feel so in the book, there's nothing where I'm like, oh, a Starfleet officer wouldn't do that, or that's not understandable for a Starfleet officer. Where there was in the first half of this season, there were things where it's like, did he just hang up on an admiral and other things, and where it's kind of like, why that doesn't make sense, and it was like, oh yeah, well, he wasn't really Starfleet. Mm-hmm. So far.
Yeah.
It's believable.
Mm-hmm. That's the impression that I get as well. I'm not as far in the book as Rachel is, but, for those of you who have seen The Conscience of the King, the original series episode, about the slaughter of all the colonists on Tarsus 4. And in the book, not to give too much away, but in the book, Lorca is on Tarsus 4 when it takes place. And his response to that is very human and very understandable, but it's also tempered by what I would call classic sort of Starfleet demeanor, in that he's mortified by the huge lapse in morality that has taken place, and he's really affected by the huge loss of life. But if I had to equate his sense of morality or justice to someone else, Prime Lorca seems a lot like Batman. He's not afraid to get into people's faces and maybe break a couple of ribs, but he'll make sure that you're still breathing afterward. So it's a cool kind of characterization of Lorca, and it's a guy that I'm frankly sad that we never really got to meet on the show itself, because it's pretty fascinating. I would definitely recommend the book to people who are thinking of reading it, because I think it's worth your time, especially if you have enjoyed the show thus far. So let's move along with the plot. After emergency surgery performed by Lorette, Ash Tyler now has his personality back, but he can still access Valk's memories. Burnham is unable to forgive his actions as Valk, and Stamets confronts Tyler, but Stamets seems to be satisfied with Tyler's own emotional turmoil. When he goes to the mess hall to get something to eat, Tyler is regarded with caution before Cadet Tilly makes a gesture and sits with him. Other members of the crew follow her lead, welcoming Tyler back into the fold of Discovery's crew. So for anyone who seems to dismiss Discovery as not quote-unquote real Star Trek, then I think they need to see this moment, because it seemed as though this helped to emphasize the kind of compassion that should be very familiar to longtime fans of the franchise, but maybe I'm projecting too. So what did you guys think of not just this specific moment, but the positioning of Tyler and Valk as we head into the season finale? Cicero?
Well, I think first off, props to Shazad Latif, because no one plays tortured like this guy. Like, I mean, it is written all over his face, the PTSD that he is currently suffering. I mean, that is something. And that moment between Stamets and Tyler was pretty good. I felt like Stamets took it easy on him, and maybe he took it easy on him because he saw how tortured he was, how tortured he looked.
Yeah.
The moment in the mess hall was a little Saved by the Bell for me. Like, yeah,
oh, really?
It was Tilly, I love her. She is the moral compass of the show. Captain Killy, she will always be a captain to me from here on out. But she started this like slow clap, and it was effectively a slow clap when she goes to sits down next to Tyler. The comment that she made to him was perfect. He says he's fine, and she's like, "How could you be?" And just like, listen, you idiot, just shut up and eat. And if you want to talk, I'm here. Right. And then, that was the slow clap. Right. And then by the time we end that scene, everyone's coming and congratulating him and welcoming him back. Like he just finished the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. I mean, it was just, it was kind of weird and a little hokey for me. But I knew what they were going for.
Yeah, sure. Zaki, how about you?
I liked it. Now I feel like self-conscious for liking it.
You're probably right, Zaki.
What's that?
I said you're probably right, so it doesn't matter.
Well, I mean, it is. To Cicero's point, it's very transparent what they're doing, which is really showing how the absence of Lorca, who really is kind of this a joy vampire. I mean, he leaves, and suddenly these people are acting like Starfleet officers again. I think that when it comes to Ash, I mean, it's an interesting situation because, Cicero's point is well made, which is why are they so readily willing to accept him? I can see it from Tilly. It's harder to see why Detmer goes there and everybody else. But on the other hand, it's like, well, this is the Star Trek future where we would hope people would do this,
Right.
Yeah, sure. Exactly. Rachel?
I don't know. Maybe the Star Trek future is kind of like a Saved by the Bell. I kind of agree with Cicero. I thought it was a little bit heavy-handed.
All right.
Like it should have like the PSA like da da da.
Right.
The more you know.
Right.
You gotta sit with the bullied kid, the kid who's been bullied by the Klingon that's living inside of his body.
Inside of him.
But it was also sweet. So
yeah. I liked it.
I liked it too.
I liked it too, sure.
I mean,
hey, we're all having like a Saved by the Bell moment now.
I'm so excited.
The more you know. No, but I mean, I think that it does get to the spirit of shared struggle that often defines a lot of crews in Star Trek. And, I would still prefer more screen time for Detmer and for Ariam and for Reese and some of these other characters that we've only seen glimpses of at their stations, whether it's on the bridge or in the engineering lab. But it did have a little bit of a Saved by the Bell moment. It did seem a little old-fashioned, but to quote Agent Coulson, maybe we need a little old-fashioned here and there. Right. Nice. And because I think in that respect, it does work. And I do see, barring some terrible disaster in the season finale, I do see a future for Tyler on the show, especially if he has Voq's memories. It seems like there could be some pretty interesting creative potential to explore. I mean, obviously, we know that the Klingon War isn't going to be front and center in season 2, which just puts more question marks on the season finale. But there might be some value in having a once Klingon crew member on your ship. So we'll see how things shake out. But for what it's worth, I did like it. But I'm also a huge Superman fan, so maybe my threshold for hokiness or Saved by the Belliness is a little higher than most people's. But either way, let's move along with the plot. Upon their arrival, the crew finds Starbase 1 conquered by Klingon House Dagor, and the remainder of Starfleet's command withdraws to protect Earth from the oncoming Klingon threat. Emperor Georgiou tells Michael Burnham that she defeated the Klingons in the Mirror Universe with a surprise attack on their homeworld of Kronos, and with the Federation forces being desperate, Cornwell agrees to replicate that now. To jump into Klingon territory, Stamets terraforms a desolate moon to grow a new crop of spores so they can use the spore drive and jump to Kronos, the first humans to visit the planet since the days of the NX-01. So Zaki, as a fan, what does it mean for you to actually hear both the name Jonathan Archer and the number NX-01 in dialogue on the newest series in the Star Trek franchise? I mean, you're a longtime admirer of Star Trek Enterprise, so that had to have affected you in some way. So tell us.
Yeah,
about
man.
it.
As soon as she says it, I was like this. Unconsciously, I made that noise.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I mean, you know me. I'm a big fan of that show. So anything that laces it tighter into the canon is fine by me. But just even in a broader sense, completely separate from Enterprise specifically, I think one of Star Trek's biggest assets is the same thing that people consider one of its biggest debits, which is its sense of history and the idea that this is a sprawling story that spans several hundred years, and I think I love when they make an effort to not in an oppressive way, but just in a subtle way, make you say, yeah, hey, this is part of that same continuum,
Yeah.
And in that sense, I'm glad Discovery is acknowledging that history.
Yeah, I mean, it's especially since there's now been a little bit more distance from it. Enterprise definitely seems to be regarded in a higher level than it used to be, and it's nice to see Discovery sort of codifying what that legacy means, especially in the timeline of the entire Prime universe. So,
very true.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Well, it looks like in addition to the existence of the Mirror Universe becoming classified, we're getting into a little bit more pedantic territory, but we're also getting to a point where the spore drive will likely be a thing of the past by the time the TOS rolls around. So this seems to follow on from at least one other scenario when Starfleet discovered that higher warp speeds do damage to space in the Next Generation. Spore travel on the mycelial network potentially has cataclysmic consequences, not just for the galaxy, but for the multiverse. So, do you think the use of the spore drive is finished after season 1? Rachel?
Well, you know what happened when they discovered that higher warp speeds did damage to space, right?
They created a speed limit.
And then they just forgot about it for the entire rest of the series. It was never referenced. It was referenced one time when
whenever there was like a huge crisis, they said, this is a crisis, we need to break the speed limit.
One time.
Did it happen one time?
One time.
Zaki, you've watched the show now. Did it happen one time?
As to the best of my recollection, yes, but I'm not an authoritative source on that.
Well, didn't on Voyager, didn't they go to warp factor 10?
And then Tom got turned into a lizard. Yeah.
Yes, Tom Paris, and the captain were turned into lizards. Where they
was she? It's been a while since.
Yes, so they were.
Isn't that considered like one of the worst episodes of Star Trek?
It's an episode I watched. They were both turned into lizards, and then they had lizard children that lived on the planet somewhere. After they went to warp factor 10.
That's a thing that happened.
Yes.
No memory of this.
We'll watch it after we're done.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So maybe they'll just forget that the spores are going to destroy the multiverse. Not think about it. I hope not. Yeah, I would hope not too. But hey, we all drive, cars that burn fossil fuels.
Right.
So.
Oh, fair enough.
Just don't think about it. You got to get to work.
Cicero, do you think that the spore drive is going to continue usage after season 1?
I'll answer after I finish laughing at Rachel.
Okay.
Yes, I do think. I think the short answer is yes. I do think it'll happen. We will see it after season 1, but it will be a rarely used plot device. It will be the thing that they use in their moment, in their darkest hour. They'll pull out the spore drive. And we'll probably see it 2 or 3 times during the course of a regular length season. If they do 15 episodes, we may see it once or twice a season.
Okay. Zaki, what's your prediction?
I think that the spore drive is done so after this. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I mean, I was thinking a little bit more about what we were talking about with stepping on the toes of previous Trek. If I had to assign a giant flagrant violator of that, it didn't step on the toes of TOS necessarily. Well, kinda. You could say it stepped on the toes of everything. It was an episode of Enterprise where you saw Ferengi. I think it was called Acquisition. Was that the name of the episode?
Wrong. That
episode, they did everything they could to make it that only Tucker sees them, and he doesn't know what the hell they are. I mean, you know what I mean? And you can see the strings being pulled. They did try, is my point.
Yes, they did. You're right. They did try. It's not something that I'll just completely write off. They did make an effort, but Ferengi and Enterprise is
like even when they had the Borg on Enterprise. Remember that
was worse.
You think that was worse?
That was worse. Yeah.
But even that, they never refer to themselves as the Borg. They're never fully Borgified. Like there's all this stuff that they're doing to keep the Enterprise D as the ship that first meets the Borg.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll have to come up with like a watch list of episodes for a future Discovery debrief where we just say, okay, biggest continuity violators.
So, on that note,
yes,
for those of you that are watching Discovery and are either new to the Star Trek universe, or it's just been a while since you've watched anything, the good folks at Memory Alpha have created something called cadet training. So if you Google cadet training and Memory Alpha or cadet training and Star Trek Discovery, you will see what episodes in the canon of Star Trek television refer to what episode in Discovery. So you can so on your rewatches of Discovery, you can watch all of the old episodes from all across the Star Trek universe, and then watch the episode of Discovery, so you have all of the information that you need. And that is cadet training on Memory Alpha.
That is a wonderful, wonderful thing to bring in. Thank you, Cicero.
No problem.
That's terrific.
Every once in a while I do that. Bring in something useful.
Oh, okay, yeah. So it's something that they started on the After Trek show. I see.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, maybe we'll have to run through the cadet training on here just for fun. We'll have to see what people think about it. All right, well, let's move along with the plot to the final moment. So, Emperor Giorgio tells Sarek and Admiral Cornwell of other essential information she has related to her own conquering of Kronos in the Mirror Universe. So what they decide to do is have her pose as the deceased Captain Filippo Giorgio, who they quote-unquote reveal to have recently been rescued from the Klingons, to lead the mission and to take command of Discovery. And that is where today's podcast episode title is derived from. Inescapable Reflections, because it seems Discovery just can't seem to get away from having a Terran Imperial captain.
Right.
So, what do you guys think of this ending? Do you find it intriguing? Do you find it tiresome? Do you find it something else? Is it going to set up the ultimate victory for the Federation because you've got the Dominus of Kronos in charge of one of the Federation's most advanced starships? Rachel, what is this?
Cornwell, you're stupid. What are you doing? That's just how I feel. Like, why would you do that? Why?
Yeah.
Like,
this is a bad idea.
Yeah, it's a bad idea. It doesn't make sense. I don't know.
All right. Well, Zaki.
To me, this just goes to what I said last time, where I'm like, Burnham dragging her back to the Prime universe doesn't make sense because we know she has to die.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just, you can't be like, oh, the Mirror Universe is classified, but by the way, Giorgio is like running around out there. So to me, it's you know what it reminds me of? It's like Harv Bennett's complaint about the premise for Star Trek V.
Oh.
Where, I don't know if you remember, he gave an interview where he was like, the problem is that if you read the premise in TV Guide, it's the Enterprise goes off in search of God. And you're like, well, obviously they're not going to find God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Because that's not what Star Trek can do. So then, the movie starts. We're like, we're going to find God. And it's like, well, no, you're not. So then it's like, right? So then you're like, well, maybe the experience will be exciting. But that's where this is. It's like, well, we know most likely it has to end with this Giorgio being gone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, well, we got one more episode. Let's see if it's exciting. And I get it, because if you've got access to Michelle Yeoh, you use her because she's a great actress.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I'm banging the same drum, man. Can we be done, please, with the Mirror Universe? This is like indigestion at this point. Like you're tasting sushi from 3 days ago.
Indigestion, Zaki. That sounds like.
And another thing.
I'm sorry. I'm way too.
No, that's perfect.
No, point is well taken, though. Absolutely. Well, Cicero, what do you think with a new Terran captain, but who may be, I don't know, a more dangerous one potentially?
Man, I'm so conflicted by it, right? Because like, I think I've been the most pro Emperor Giorgio in the Prime universe member of our command deck here, and so I'm happy she's there. Again, I'm happy that Michelle Yeoh's there. And kind of like what Zaki said is, you kind of know that she has to die. And the reason that you know that she has to die is because it's Michelle Yeoh. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I would be shocked if she's given a commitment beyond this season to the producers of Discovery for, to the showrunners for, a second season or what have you. So, I mean, it just makes sense that she's gone. The other part that that's disappointing to me is that we had this moment last week from Saru, where he showed that he was the captain. And I was full board ready to embrace Saru as the very first starship captain that is non-human in the history of Star Trek television, and to lead the show, and he was only able to do it for half an episode.
Yeah.
And before somebody else was sitting in this chair. I mean, he barely got to sit in this chair this episode.
Although to his credit, he did when Admiral Cornwell was overtaken with shock over what happened at Starbase. Right. Who was there, right?
Right, absolutely. And again, and that's that only goes to further illustrate my point that he is not only is he willing and able, he is capable to thrive in command, and he's not being given the chance to do so. The other thing that I noticed was how incapable Admiral Cornwell is at command. Mm-hmm. I really honestly think she should be relieved of duty. That the stress of everything that's happening over the last 9 months is just kind of taking its toll on her. She froze up several times, sitting on the bridge and sitting in the chair. And people are looking to her for direction, and really honestly, the person that they should be looking to for direction is Saru. The fact that Giorgio is back means that Saru has to defer to this person he knows isn't the captain. But you have to keep in check because she's a Terran. Not only is she a Terran, she's the Terran Emperor.
Yeah.
Who openly despises aliens, non-humans. So,
and the Federation.
And yeah, right. And the Federation. I wonder, I think she fears the ideals of the Federation. I don't know if she openly despises the Federation. But that's just me. But
let me put it to you another way. Do you think that, considering that the Federation is for all intents and purposes kind of backed into a corner,
right?
And Sarek even kind of bluntly says Starfleet tactics aren't working, does the Federation need the Emperor?
Absolutely.
You think so?
Absolutely. It was a Terran. It was a human Vulcan that started the conflict. It was a Terran who exasperated the conflict in Lorca by removing the Discovery from the Prime Universe and putting them into the Mirror Universe. And it's going to be a Terran along with that human Vulcan in Burnham that will save the Federation and start to right this wrong that has been created in this 9-month absence from the Prime Universe.
I'm going to make a prediction.
Okay.
Okay, Chris.
All right, you looking in my eyes, Rachel?
Yes, I am.
Oh, right. I can't do that. Oh.
I'm sorry. One of these days,
right?
One of these days, we'll all have to sit in front of the same table. But my prediction is that the season will end similarly to the way it began. I think Michael's going to have to kill the Emperor.
Wow.
I think there's going to be a little bit of poetic justice, or at least poetic license with it, just because she obviously didn't want Giorgio to die, and it was arguably her actions that directly led to the captain's death. But I think she's going to be put into a situation where Giorgio is going to try and seize more direct power in the Prime Universe, and it's going to have to be Michael who puts her down. That's going to be my guess, and that could potentially exonerate her of her mutiny.
Wow.
And because I have a hard time seeing, first of all, we knew that Michael saw herself as operating on borrowed time, right? And something was going to have to change her circumstances so that we can continue to follow her on this show. Because I have a hard time seeing them do away with Michael Burnham. I really hope they don't.
No, she's the star of the show.
I think she's in it for the long haul, I think. So that's going to be, we'll see how right or wrong I am in a week.
That's very Sophocles of you, man. To call that.
Hey, I think it kind of makes sense, but we'll see what actually happens. So, all right, guys. Well, final thoughts as we prepare to head into the season finale, and we're not going to be able to see Star Trek Discovery again until 2019. Rachel?
We'll see. We'll see how they wrap this up. But
do you think there's a lot riding on it? Like, you sound...
Yeah, like, I'm gonna be really mad if they don't wrap it up in a way I don't find satisfactory.
Do you find a cliffhanger likely or unlikely?
I was told that there was gonna be not a cliffhanger.
Okay. You were told?
By Twitter, and I cannot remember who on Twitter, but I did read on Twitter that it was going to be a complete story, and that they implied no cliffhanger. Maybe there'll be a cliffhanger. Probably there'll be a cliffhanger. All right, 180. There's gonna be a cliffhanger because it's 2018.
Well, there's a difference between like a hard or soft cliffhanger, right?
Soft cliffhanger. I think that there'll be something that's like, oh, what's gonna happen? But that if whatever I read on Twitter was right, which I am placing it in a reliable place in my brain. Like, I feel like it was like Jason Isaacs or a writer or something. That's it. The story will be wrapped up.
All right, so, Well, we'll have to see. So, but.
Look, the Klingon War thing it's really bothering me, and I can see. And they need to fix it. Okay.
All right. I don't disagree with you. I think you're right, but you sound like your opinion of the entire show is resting on the season finale. No.
Okay. I've had a great time this season.
Okay.
So
all right.
It can't take that away from me.
Fair enough. Cicero, final thoughts.
Yeah, I'm here for it. I've been here for it. I wonder if there will be a cliffhanger. I really want there to kind of be something that has me wondering what's going to happen for however long the hiatus is. I just don't want to forget about the show in the time between when it leaves us next week and when it returns. I've had a blast with this show, and again, it is in no small part thanks to you, sir, because had you not asked me to be on the show, I probably wouldn't be watching. I wouldn't be watching Discovery until probably like April or May, and just binging it all. So I'm glad I was able to watch it in the moment. And it really gave me something to look forward to week in and week out. It's going to be a really, really interesting conversation next time we sit down and speak.
Absolutely. Well, I'm also glad that you were able to join us. It wouldn't be the same without you.
Oh man. That warmed my heart.
Thank you for, well, it's true. It's absolutely true. So thank you for taking the time to observe it with us. Our own Saved by the Bell moment. Zach Morris is trash. Well, as for my final thoughts, I'm really, really anticipating the season finale. I'm not anticipating not having new episodes of the show to look forward to. As I alluded to before, when we had to endure the mid-season finale, it was hard enough, even with new episodes imminently on the horizon. But I'm really interested to see how the season will stick its landing, or if it will stick its landing. I'm pretty confident that it will. But, I think I've generally been a little more forgiving on some of the show's faults when compared with other members of our panel. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have things that it needs to resolve, especially by next week. Perhaps they have put too much on its plate. I have not seen a runtime for the final episode of the season. I hope it's a little bit longer, but I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. But very anticipatory for the season finale, obviously, like most of you are, I'm sure, that are listening to this episode. But that's actually probably going to do it for us here on episode 16 of Discovery Debrief. We hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please like and follow us on our social media channels. And if you'd be so kind, we'd also appreciate it if you wrote a review for the show on iTunes or Facebook. It only takes a minute and we'll be happy to read your review on the air when it is posted. If you have any questions, you can follow the show on Twitter at DSC Debrief, where you can also find all of our individual Twitter handles. And feel free to send us questions through Twitter, our Facebook like page, or by emailing us at hailingfrequencies@discoverydebrief.com. Please be sure to set your courses for this feed next week as we prepare to discuss the season finale for Star Trek Discovery Season 1. And like we did after the last finale, we'll also likely do an episode that recaps the entirety of Season 1 before we get on to some other things on the horizon, including a review of the Drastic Measures novel, as well as some discussion and reflection on previous elements of the franchise as we wait for Discovery Season 2. We don't plan on leaving you completely. You just might not hear from us on as regular a basis, but we do enjoy bringing the show to you and appreciate everyone who has expressed their enjoyment of it. All those details will be forthcoming, so keep an eye on our social media channels and, of course, on your podcast feed. As always, though, until then, go boldly, my friends.